Right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you so much for being here for our next webinar, Human Work in Complex Conditions, Trauma Responsive Restorative Advocacy with Amy Dallas. We're going to get started here in just about a minute. I already see folks introducing themselves in the chat. So feel free to do that. Introduce yourselves. Let us know where you are listening from. Got folks from Harrisonburg, Virginia, South Surrey, British Columbia, Atlanta, Georgia, folks all the way from Brazil. Welcome in, welcome in. Nashville, Tennessee. More representation from Canada, Washington, D.C., Denver. Great. Yes, let's get comfortable with using the comments, the chat section. There's going to be some opportunity throughout the webinar to talk to one another and give some responses in the chat. So it is good that we are all comfortable with that. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Demointe Wesley. I am the Associate Director at the Zaire Institute for Restorative Justice, which is a program of Eastern Mennonite University's Center for Justice and Peace Building. I'm so excited to be with you for our webinar today, Human Work in Complex Conditions, Trauma Responsive Restorative Advocacy with Amy Dallas. And it's my pleasure to introduce Amy to you. We're going to have a presentation by Amy where she's going to be taking us through this framework of trauma responsive restorative advocacy, walking us through some different practices that can be really useful, especially in direct service. There's going to be some time for practicing together and a little Q&A. I'll have some announcements at the end for you, and then we will get out of here. Thank you so much. So without further ado, I am so happy to introduce to you Amy Dallas. Amy is an attorney, project generator, educator, somatic and restorative practitioner, and coach. Her work helps people and institutions learn to reflect and respond with care to those they serve and to one another, even in challenging conditions. She believes we can cultivate the awareness and fortitude to move forward in a good way. Amy has a wealth of knowledge and experience doing direct service, both as a defense attorney and now working for the Vera Institute of Justice as a program manager. And she is my colleague and buddy on the board of directors for the National Association of Community and Restorative Justice, NACRJ. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Amy Dallas. Amy, so happy for you to be here with us.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Demointe, for that lovely intro. And it's so good to be here with everybody. Loving the chat, loving seeing where everybody's from. Love seeing some familiar names, some new names. Just really great to be here. So thank you for that. And thanks for saying yes to joining me today to talk about trauma responsive restorative advocacy. So before we get started, I do want to set just a few intentions. Demointe gave a little bit of a bio. I'll share a little bit more about myself, but before we do that, just a few intentions that I have as I start this workshop with you all today. So I cannot see you all. I cannot see your facial expressions. I can't really quite see how you're showing up in the room today. So chat. I see that everybody's already kind of comfortable with chat. And so I will be inviting more interaction. This is a conversation. I'll say that this is one of the first times to be able to speak about this work in kind of a public way. So it's also really exciting to hear from you all about how is it resonating for you, of feedback in real time. And I'll be asking questions. And so, yes, let's talk through the chat. It'll be our portal. I think there's like a reality show where people fall in love through a wall. Like this will be our way of communicating with each other and getting to know each other. So another intention that I have for this workshop, for this webinar, is really giving a lot of contour and texture to this framework, but also trying to be very specific about the certain areas that I'm teasing out. So I wrote this article. It is over 100 pages and close to like 500 footnotes. So there's a lot to say, and there's a lot of content and a lot of material. And we are going to go a little bit on a journey today, touching all of the different areas. But I really have an intention of not overwhelming us with information. So I'm going to do my best to just kind of pick out a few key areas and some areas for us to explore together. And as Demointe said, a third intention here is I'm going to be inviting you all to some practices. And the intention behind this is really just exploration, trying it, experimentation. It's a little bit part of the framework, actually, experiential learning. So these practices will always be just an invitation. They're not mandatory. So if it works for you, great. If not, don't do it. And it's always just going to be completely optional. So you have your choice in how you want to approach it, but I will be inviting us into practice today. So with that, we're actually going to get into one of our first practices, right? We're going to just kind of get into actually practicing together as we enter this space. We're going to do a little self-inventory because a lot of what this framework is about is really kind of understanding ourselves and seeing where we are. So I'm going to invite Demointe back. When we do practices, Demointe will join me on screen. This helps for both for modeling so that we can both, show you all these practices, but also so you can see the effects on us. And we're here with you practicing alongside. So we're going to do just a self-inventory practice right now. We're going to just check in, see how we're doing right now. So I invite you now to just be in a comfortable seat. Just get in the most comfortable way you can be and just focus your attention on how you are right now. What is your current state? You may be holding a lot right now, a little bit. And the invitation is to kind of do an assessment on a scale of 1 to 10. Maybe 1 being just everything's really chill, feeling very relaxed. 10 being like, I can't take another thing. Maybe so 1 to 10, maybe where are you there? And as you kind of check in with where you are right now, see if you can imagine your current state in terms of landscape. So if your current state was a landscape, what would it be? Would it be crashing waves, really chaotic and foamy and intense? Or is there maybe a smooth kind of mist in a forest, kind of misty and quiet, damp? Or maybe your landscape's a desert. It's just feeling really dry right now, but also vast. Maybe there's mountains, feeling very, very sturdy. So just take a moment and check in on what your landscape is, where you are on 1 to 10, 10 being very stressed, 1 being chill. And just take another second. And if it's not working for you, don't do it. Nothing to do but notice. And once you've kind of felt into where you are right now, the invitation is to share in the chat. Where are you? So I'll share first. I'll say I'm at like a 4 or 5 because I can feel my energy is up. I feel like I have a lot to say. I'm feeling excitement to be here. And so my landscape feels like sprouts, like sprouting flowers. Like I just feel very like there's things brewing and growing. What about you, Demointe? Where are you checking in?
Yeah. I did really like the image of like the waves. And so I have like really gentle waves, like a slow moving tide. I hear some seagulls maybe pulling my attention a bit away from that gentle tide. But for the most part, I'm really feeling that slow flow.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And now in the chat, if there's anybody who feels like sharing or just what they might have noticed in that practice, I'm seeing a 3, feeling an occasional slight breeze. Okay, so we're checking in kind of on a more relaxed scale. And someone's saying about a scale of 7 as a baseline these days. It's pretty high. And landscape is a dam and it's holding, but there's knowledge that it won't always hold. So you can feel that kind of pressure. It's there, it's mounting, but not forever. Beautiful. Ooh, a 6 with critters around. Nice, very active 6. Sprouting spring flowers and colors in a forest with warm sunshine. feeling inspired and excited and also tired. Not a lot of sleep last night. Feel that. Feel that. Got a 3-4. They're in the trees, the wind is blowing in the leaves, but there's some soft earth underneath. And I'll do one more, 4-5, some hills. Okay, so we're not fully at mountains, we're hilly. Yeah, all of that is welcome here. However, we're all showing up. Thank you for sharing and what you noticed. So why did we even do that practice? It's kind of an interesting way to start. So, what's essential, as I briefly mentioned, is that in this framework about being trauma responsive and restorative is really an understanding of how we are, right? How we notice the state that we're in. And when we know where we are, we can better notice what choice we might be able to make and better notice how we are engaging with the people around us and engaging with our work, right? So we might be noticing that we need something or we're lacking in some way, or that we actually have like really high capacity, or we're just overwhelmed and taking on too much. So these kind of noticing practices are really helpful to help us start to hone our capacity to be a little bit more self-aware, right? So, as I talk about trauma responsive restorative advocacy, I'm going to share a little bit as to who I am to be talking about this. So, it's a framework that is incorporating practices, obviously, theory, research, science, practitioner wisdom, and some ancient worldviews and some cultural worldviews that when we blend together and practice this framework on an individual and collective level, it can help us shift our own approach to how we are in direct service work and the ways that we relate to the people that we serve, our clients, our students, our participants, but also, the way that we are influenced by them, and also the conditions of our work environments and even our broader culture. We can help shift those conditions as well. So I came to this framework from my own experience working in direct service for most of my adult life. I'm going to give you just a quick snapshot as to who I am. I'm a child of Jewish Soviet immigrants who immigrated to the Metro Detroit area. And when they first came to the US, they owned a Jewish deli. And so I grew up in a world of quite literally service, right? Literally serving people. And that really informed a lot of my understanding of how how we move in the world. We work with people, we work with others, we work in these environments. As I was growing up, I was kind of looking at the world around me, making a lot of observations, while also simultaneously hearing about my family's lineage and histories of um, their Jewish histories in Eastern Europe, and kind of really recognizing injustice, right? And noticing around me the way that the way that my neighbors are living versus how we are living, et cetera. And so I was really pulled to work towards peace and justice. So joined the Peace Corps, went to college, worked all through college, joined the Peace Corps, went to law school, became a lawyer, became a public defender. And so a lot of that is through me, with me, it's with me in all the work that I do. And even now I still work, as I say, legal system, criminal legal system adjacent. So this work is all very, very direct and really important and connected to me and who I am. So as I shared a little bit about myself, I would love to know, I know I saw already some people sharing in the room, but I would love to know a little bit more about your direct service context. So kind of what is your role and what is your context? So I said I'm, lawyer, public defender, legal system is kind of my context. So what is your context? Are you working in the education field? Are you working in legal systems? Are you working in the health systems? I'd love to hear who's in the room so we can all kind of see who's here today as we talk about these topics. So feel free to add in the chat. We're going to be talking a little bit about what the complexity and the chaos of our environments feel like right now, too. Would be really, really curious to hear what is your entry point into direct service work. Okay, we have a pastor and crisis chaplain. Yes, talk about complex work. We're working with street-involved youth. Somebody's working with juvenile probation and the court system, so also court systems, yep. Restorative justice diversion trainer and facilitator, so working directly with the restorative justice work, victim services, facilitating restorative processes with sexual harm cases in education and some workplaces. Okay, so some cross systems, criminal defense investigator and mitigation specialists, a teacher, so we have the education field, advocating for children and youth by equipping other educators, so really doing that top-down systemic impact work. So we have government in the health field and mental health field. Lawyers, so I see the lawyers, I see y'all. We're here, we got attorneys in the room. That's right. Restorative justice work in the juvenile justice system. We're working in the human rights, health, we have social workers, okay, trainers, educators. I'm going to kind of scroll a little bit, mediators. Yes, okay. A lot of restorative justice practitioners, naturally, as this is a ZARE webinar. Lots of working with youth, totally. Education. So I'm seeing we have quite a spread of people in this room. We have people working in the health fields. We have a lot of people working criminal justice, criminal legal system lane, a lot of people working with youth, education. So really, we are really covering direct service, aren't we, in this room? So I really appreciate you all, coming in and coming in with your context. So I'm going to ask another question for us to think about right now, since the theme of this is doing human work, which we clearly all here are doing. We really are doing human work, all of us in this room right now. Thinking about the chaos, right, and the complexity. And I'm going to ask that we kind of share right now a little bit of a dump in of what is causing so much chaos and uncertainty in our both world, like our broader world right now, and in our immediate sort of workplace environments, into our immediate orbits. So let's talk a little bit about what is that chaos? What are we all experiencing as the chaos, is the uncertainty? What's making it that much harder to do the work that we do right now? What's making it that much harder sometimes to just get through the day? So I'd love to hear from you all. I'll say, I'll just speak broadly from where I'm situated in the field that I'm in, just seeing a lot of the uncertainty with where resources have gone in the last week or last year or two, where a lot of really good work has been stopped abruptly, and just how chaotic and uncertain that all felt. So in the chat, I'm seeing some legal and social attack on trans people and migrants. Yes, definitely happening right now, really adding to complexity, fear, chaos, for sure. What other kind of things are people noticing that is adding to the chaos and complexity? We're seeing just a lack of vulnerability and humility. Yeah. Abandonment of legal protections from government. Oof. Yes, yes. So painful, so scary. Youth trauma and community disconnectedness. Yeah, I would say that on a global, we're seeing that on a sort of broader scale too. Yeah. Children and families disappearing from our community, an illusion of separability and inferiority, ideas that there are wise single solutions, really trying to have these like narrow ways of thinking. Yeah. Siloing effect of fear. So kind of putting people into silos where kind of just people are in retreat out of fear. Lack of funding, historic lack of access to equitable healthcare, climate crises, moral injury. Oh, yeah, right? All of this is really adding to this environment of uncertainty and chaos. Um, there's intercommunity and lateral violence in activist spaces, social conditions, limited resources, overwhelm. There's just so much going on. And I'm going to just read a context from Brazil is a lot of social polarization, emotional exhaustion, reduced resources. People are carrying trauma and feeling increasingly overwhelmed. And there's just a lot of changes in the world. And of course, to mention also effects of war and genocide, direct and indirect. Whew. Yes, yes, yes. So these are the contexts that we are all trying to do work in. We're all still trying to come to the people that we're working with in a way that can connect with them. And yet we are all experiencing and feeling all of the uncertainty and chaos and real sort of distress over the conditions that we're all in right now. So this is where we're gonna talk about that, and I think I really appreciate us all kind of bringing that into the space right now. So that is the context that we're in, and now we're gonna kind of zoom in a bit more into, what are the capacities then that we need in this time. These challenges, we can't be naive to them. They're not easily going away. Somebody had mentioned in the chat like a seeking for like a simple solution, and sadly, there does not seem to be a simple single solution. So what kind of capacities do we need to be able to grow and to support people through these extraordinary difficult challenges, especially when we're able to be supporting them while also simultaneously supporting ourselves? And also being active and trying to influence things to move in a more positive and restorative direction. It's a lot easier said than done. So, one more contextual just intro on myself as well is that this piece that I wrote, I want to just kind of share a bit about it as well, is that I wrote this for and about legal education and the legal profession. And I did that because that's my context, right? That's the world that I knew, that's the world that I came up in. And focusing on the legal profession in particular really is also a focus on a context and a system and an environment that is inherently adversarial. It is competitive by nature. It is part of what the legal field does, right? Is sort of trying to win arguments in order to advocate for other people. So many of us come to this kind of work, the legal field, with really an intention and a desire to be helpful, to help others, to advocate, to make change. And when we are inside these systems and we not only witness and see how the systems operate, we also are impacted and affected by it ourselves. So when I wrote this piece, in some ways, it was a real love letter to the field because it was a way of me thinking of like, why can't it be different? You know, like, why can't legal education feel a little bit different? Why have I not learned in these contexts some of the practices, research, science, the things that I write about? Why was that not coming through my workplace or from my legal education? So over the years of working as a public defender, it was about a decade, I learned a lot. I've gathered a lot. My curiosity has led me to a lot of different learning and exploration from the questions that I had, like, why does the system run the way it does? How are we addressing harm? And is this really the way? How do we better maybe address conflict and harm? And how are we also addressing and responding to trauma in these spaces? So that's where this piece comes from. Now, today I'm going to be talking about it broadly with direct service because I'm actually legitimately curious. Does this translate across fields? My guess is that it does. So we're going to talk about it today, and I would love to be hearing from you all as we're in it. So let's jump in, shall we? We're going to put on some slides. I'll be doing some slides today and some coming back and speaking with you all. So trauma responsive restorative advocacy. It is a bit of a mouthful, but we're going to break it down and we're going to talk about the different pieces to it. But first, let's get into our direct service roles. Let me do this here. Here we go. So this is you. This is you. This is you in your role that you have just you put in the chat that you shared. This is what you do every day. This is your professional role. And this is also just you. You're in the space. And this is your client or your student or your participant or the person that you're speaking with right now and accompanying through something quite difficult. And I'd like to invite you now to just think about this relationship, okay? Think about this relationship, you and this person. So what is the conversation that's happening right now? Is this a check-in or just kind of a serious conversation? Is there a tense discussion? And what does this relationship feel like? Is it easy? Is it complicated? Is it really surface? Quite deep? And what does this relationship bring up in you? A sense of urgency or obligation? Do you feel compassion? Do you feel sadness? Are you annoyed? Does it make you angry? Just think about this context. This is you. This is the person that you're directly dealing with and working with and communicating with. But we know that in the systems and in the environments that we work in, it's not just you and one other person, it's you and all of these people, right? So these are your other students. These are all your other clients. These are all your participants. These are also your coworkers. This is also that person that you still need to email back. This is also the person who won't stop calling you. This is also that person that's kind of like irking you at work. But this is the environment. This is direct service, is it not? It's us, and it's all these people. And so maybe this is a way we could think of this as our beloved community of direct service. Everybody's here, even the people that you'd rather not be, they're here too. Maybe we prefer they stay all the way over there, but we just can't throw them out. Sorry. So this is the context that we're in, you know, and trauma responsive restorative advocacy focuses on the nuances of all of these micro relationships is what I call them, right? The relationship between you and the person that you're immediately engaging with and all of the other relationships, what happens in the one-on-one, what happens as you're moving through your world more broadly. And so you are the key source. Okay? And you're like a key contributor So it's really about recognizing how are you affected by others and how do you affect the context? How are you affected by others and the context? How do you affect it too? And of course, because we are here in this space, this is you and this is your conference. This is your circle that you're holding, right? This is the group that you're facilitating. So we're going to be thinking about the interactions that you're having in this context as well. The framework applies here too. So when we think about ourselves in our roles, what are some of the terms that maybe come to mind about ourselves in our contexts? I did a bit of a brainstorm here, so y'all didn't have to. But if there are anything additional that you might see, feel free to put it in the chat. If there's anything that's on this that might be resonating for you when you think about your role or the position that you're in, what might be resonant, you know? We think of ourselves sometimes as the protector in these kind of systems, right? We think about ourselves as the advocate, maybe as a steward. Gatekeeping has gotten a lot of bad play as a word, but also just like, yeah, maybe we are the gatekeeper. We actually can open up some things for people that others maybe cannot. Circle keeper, witness, server. I see those coming through the chat. Beautiful. Maybe we're the teacher, right? We're a guide, facilitator. Yes. I really personally resonate with defender. We are, or maybe we're the professional, we're the expert, right? People look to us for our expertise. They want our expertise, our help, right? Co-researcher. Ooh, yes. Spiritual pallbearer. Beautiful. Guide, support, service. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways we can be thinking about our roles here. So let's get a little bit into, ooh, I saw disruptor come through. Yes, disruptor. Yes, disruptor. Healer, mentor. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for those. So we're going to talk about the framework now and do it in a few different chunks. First, we're going to define what it means to be in this framework in a restorative way. We're going to define restorative advocacy. So what this means. Okay. So the restorative advocacy piece of this is grounded in restorative justice. I love being able to talk about this in this group with you all, as many of you, I am sure, already understand restorative justice and have an understanding of what the values and principles are behind it. But to be sort of clear here, it's really grounded and in centering relationships and affirming human dignity. Okay. So what are some of the values of restorative justice? This should be an easy one. I want to be seeing waterfall right now. What are some of the values and principles of restorative justice? This is sort of like pew, 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 pew. Like what are they? What do we say are some of the values of restorative justice? Let's say nobody's ever heard of it before. What would you be telling them are some of the values and principles of restorative justice? I'm going to take a sip here while you fire up that chat. Here we go. Human dignity, human-centered, community, repairing harm, relationality, interconnectedness, respect. I knew you'd all come through. I knew it. I knew it. Collaborative. Yep. Care. Beautiful. Belief we can do better. Ooh, yes. Okay. Collective responsibility, understanding, Ubuntu. Yes, I am because we are. Transformation is possible. These are really good. These are really good. Connection, community, responsibility. Okay, so we got a great grounding here. Core values include, so this is not exhaustive. You all have some great ones coming through. I'm actually need to like copy paste, put these in too. Prioritizing relationship, right? In interconnectedness, we saw that. Repairing harm, dignity, honesty, truth telling, kinship. I love that one just came through. Sharing space. Yes, you're more than the worst thing you've done. So all of these principles, yeah, there aren't bad people. So these are some of the values that we understand restorative justice to include and entail. And so, of course, because we're here at the Zare Institute, I'm going to quote Mr. Howard Zare, which gives us one definition, which is taking relationships seriously, right? Envisioning yourself in an interconnected web of people, institutions, and the environment. Okay, so we're in an interconnected web of people, institutions, and the environment. And when we're there, all of these values and principles come with us. Okay, Thanks, Mr. Zare. So here we are in our context. Let's think about our relationships, right? So how do we practice these values that we all just put into the chat in our relationships in these contexts? And especially as we're working in these environments that can be kind of chaotic, stressful, toxic, harmful, imperfect, can we also still channel the idea of Ubuntu and recognizing our presence in this web, and our role in this web? How do we interact with the people we disagree with, or we're actively, in conflict with, or trying to beat in the sort of context of the legal system? So we think about the relational value of restorative justice. Okay. And so what does it mean to be restorative? How do we do this? How do we strive to be, as the title of the piece that I wrote, in right relationship? How do we strive to be in right relationship, and what does that look like? And what does it take for us to be restorative? I'll pop in the chat just a couple nice reads. There's a poem by Crystal McLeod on the practice of being restorative. Also happy to plug a book by my dear friend Leif Seligman called Being Restorative, that grapples with all of the nuances of living in modernity and the cultures and the sort of conditioning that we have, and still try to be restorative, and working with our sort of discomfort and uncomfort in that. Listening. I love that, Patricia. Yes, listening. And so I'm going to also cite the work of Miriam Kaba, who is an author, an organizer, a prison abolitionist, who really talks about how do we intentionally try to reduce the gap between our values and our actions. So we have all these values that we understand, and in the restorative justice context, we want to be interconnected. We want to be able to repair. We want to be able to uphold dignity. And yet, well, how are we acting, and how do we decrease that gap between the two? So we're going to take a minute to really think about dignity, okay? This is sort of our concept. We're going to talk about a concept. We're going to talk about the concept of dignity, because that is part of restorative advocacy, centering relationship and upholding dignity. So I'm going to plug a book called Dignity by Donna Hicks. This was shared with me by Catherine Evans. Kathy's in the chat, so thank you, Kathy, for this. Super instrumental. And Donna Hicks writes that most of us have a gut feeling about the word dignity, but few of us have the language to describe it. Dignity is different than respect. Dignity is a birthright. Mm-hmm. And Stacey Haynes, who I'm also going to do another book plugs, who is the author of The Politics of Trauma, also a somatic practitioner, really incredible teacher, describes dignity as our inherent value and our worth as human beings. Jeremy Travis and Bruce Webster are working on a book right now on human dignity, and they describe it as the capacity to take action in ways that strengthen social ties and advance equity. And so the real emphasis there is on the agency of the individual, so the capacity to take action. So central to being human is the innate capacity to be able to engage in moral action, build community, have autonomy. We're going to move into some of the principles of dignity that Donna Hicks writes about in her book. And I'm going to put in the chat here. Thank you, Demointe. We're going to put in the chat a little link that kind of describes some of these essential principles of dignity. And you can see them. There's acceptance of identity, recognition of ourselves, and for a person to be recognized, acknowledgement and feelings of inclusion, safety, fairness, independence, understanding, giving people the benefit of the doubt, and accountability. Just sit with that for one moment. So the principles of dignity, and we'll put that resource in the chat. And so on the flip side, though, there are temptations that Donna Hicks has identified in her research throughout the world, especially in high conflict areas and with some very high-powered contexts, that she sort of observed in her decades of research, that there are a lot of these temptations that violate people's dignity. We find those to be things like saving face, shirking responsibility, seeking false identity, avoiding conflict, being the victim, resisting feedback, blaming and shaming others to deflect one's own guilt, or engaging in false intimacy and demeaning gossip. So I'm going to take just a second here to see and ask for us to notice what might be showing up in our work environments, and actually maybe what do we recognize in ourselves of these kind of temptations to violate dignity. I know we are all absolutely perfect, flawless human beings who have never, ever violated a dignity in ourselves or others. But what might be some things that we are seeing in our context, in our work environments, even in ourselves? Would be inviting us to talk about that in the chat. You know, Donna Hicks talks about that these temptations are sort of inherent. You know, humans kind of, we feel these temptations, and the work for us is really not to take the bait, you know, to not let the bad behavior of others determine our own, so that we don't need to be constantly justifying getting even. Mhm. So in the chat, I'm seeing false security feels very present. Seeking false security feels very present and alive. Mhm, mhm. Sometimes our environments, our workplaces kind of make us feel that way, or others get into that position. Saving face, somebody saying in myself, avoiding conflict, demeaning gossip. Shame, inhibiting accountability. Mhm. Blaming other systems for clients being stuck. Mhm. Being the victim or blaming, they don't understand. Yes. Working in the criminal punishment system, I constantly struggle with being a zealous advocate while also trying to keep dignity central to my work and the way I treat and interact with people on a daily basis. That is the tension. That's the tension indeed. Seeking false security. Mhm. So I'm going to take this down for just a second. We're going to do just a very short practice now, too. We're going to just feel into dignity a little bit. Okay. We're going to just take a moment to feel into our own dignity and just sort of what it feels like to us for ourselves. And also just what are we feeling as we really think about dignity. We just talked about some of the things that violate it. So the invitation right now, and of course, always optional, is to just take a moment, take a moment and just feel into dignity. Hmm? What is it? What does it feel like for you? If it's something that is sort of inherent, it's our birthright. Where is it? How's it feel? Where do you notice it? When you tap into dignity, what comes up for you? Can you place it somewhere within yourself? Is it showing up in your chest or your gut or your heart or your head? Or does it feel like it's somewhere out there? What kind of emotions might be arising for you when you think about dignity? Where do you hold it? What is the depths of it? And just let's take another second or two, just do a quick reflection on dignity. Mm, Thank you. I'm seeing some sharing in the chat already. Beautiful. So I'm seeing a comment. I feel it in my chest, being confident in who I am despite my inherent differences. Yes. Somebody else said heart. Des Moines, if you feel like sharing, what did you notice?
Yeah, I noticed I almost got this image of me like in the center with like mirrors around me. It I think like
Mm,
dignity feels like being seen and recognized, but not being like examined or dissected. It is like that very thin difference between what does it mean to be like recognized and held versus what does it mean to be like scrutinized and dissected and pulled apart.
Beautiful. Yeah. Like it's just like it reflects back to you. It's not something that
Yeah.
needs to be dissected. Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. I'm seeing also in the chat some spine and shoulders and chin. So here, my heart and love for others and shoulders, upholding worthiness kept coming up. That's beautiful too, right? Holding our shoulders up, that just feels like dignity. Another comment feels like warmth, like a light blooming from my core up through my crown, a sacredness, sacredness. Dignity is sacred, so beautiful. Shoulders for sure. We're seeing some shoulders as the theme. Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing some of what you noticed. I'm going to go back and talk a little bit more about these temptations that violate this beautiful sacred dignity that we all are inherently have, right? Someone also just commented in my neck. Hmm. So these temptations, these dignity violations, and I know a couple of people have kind of said this in the chat too. You know, what's up with these? Like, what's underneath these? Like, why? Why does this happen? And let's put cynicism aside, okay, for a minute. Let's not just be like, oh, because people suck and that's just what they do, or like because those people don't get it and that's just how they are. Like, what is underneath this? Like, why? Why do people do these dignity violations? And I did a little thinking on this, so I'm going to go to our next slide. Just some ideas around it. Fear just came through. Yep, fear, feeling fear. That's right there too. Some maybe people are doing this to kind of reinforce a sense of self, right? Sense of belonging, right? Gossip is like so one of those things that it's just like it's a very quick way to connect with other people, right? Fear, shame, seeking belonging. Beautiful. That's coming in the chat. Maybe it kind of feels good to be a little bit mean. Fear, connection, avoidance. Yeah, powerlessness. Yes, people feel powerlessness. And I was thinking a lot about these too of like what is the reason that people kind of pull for these? Like what is underneath it beyond just these sort of impulses? And I was thinking a lot about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Um, and I'll just put just like a quick refresher. We're not going to go into like super Maslow's hierarchy of needs because I'm sure many of us have studied it and thought about it, but really fundamentally, right, some of the needs are things like just basic needs that we have to survive, like breathing, like shelter, like food, etc., like just needing the things that we need to survive. And just above that, though, too, is all of these other things like belonging, right? A sense of connection and love, self-esteem and being recognized and feeling recognition and respected, um, feeling a sense of some personal security and access to resources. I'm seeing in the chat exhaustion and burnout, right? So it's just like just feeling like from a place of just lack, like can't be doing much more. Um, so perhaps there's just a lot of unmet needs too, to why people end up kind of going in these directions, why dignity gets violations. I'm not going to be pat about it. There's also a lot of sort of systemic and some intentionality around these things too. But I think we can still think underneath it. What is motivating people? What got them there? Why? Right? Why are people thinking and doing things in the way that they do? Because people are complex. Oh, my light just went out. People are messy. Okay. I mean, we all see it. We see it in our day to day. We see it in our work, and we likely all see it in ourselves too. Because we really are just animals, kind of trying to survive, trying to do the best that we can. And a lot of our shaping and our conditioning comes through in a lot of really different ways. So some of it is physical and genetic, sort of our inherent personality qualities, and a lot of it too is shaped by our experiences, our family dynamics, our cultures, the things that we've learned, the environments that we work in, the people that we are surrounded by, right? And so we really try to do our best in these kind of environments with the ways that we know how to show up. And so with that, though, we're also very, very nuanced. We're complex. We're beautiful. So what makes us unique in ourselves. It makes us sort of diverse in our experiences, but it really can make it also quite hard to understand the human experience. So we're going to connect a little bit to what it also is. I love that there was a comment about burnout and exhaustion. What also adds to this complexity and just this like feeling of trying to survive and finding stability and trying to do the best that we can with what we know is entering stress and trauma, right? Because that's a lot of what we're thinking about when in this framework and in the environments we work in. And it's really, truly part of the human experience. In being human, we feel and respond and react to stress, trauma, as we shared earlier, with the different levels of chaos that we're experiencing, is around us, and also something that we and the people that we work with have or are continually experiencing. I want to just make a note on trauma because as I was writing the article, I was also kind of these thoughts were coming up too. Is just like, yeah, trauma is a term that's a little bit kind of in the zeitgeist right now. It's gotten quite mainstream. A lot of articles out there of like, is everything trauma though? Like if people are just using the term and it's kind of being thrown around of like trauma this, trauma that, I'm so traumatized. And it's like, you're actually just inconvenienced. It's not traumatic. And there's actually a research study about the creeping concept of trauma, that actually the use of trauma in cultural concepts and even scientific concepts, it's just completely expanded since the 1980s. So whereas trauma used to be something that was really a specific physical experience, has now expanded in the ways in which we talk and think about trauma. So I'm going to just kind of give a couple contours to it as we continue in the conversation, and thinking about the way that Stacey Haynes talks about it is that we can look at trauma perhaps from a holistic perspective, right? Which was an understanding that our emotions, our thinking, our physiology, our actions and relations are integral or inseparable. And it's an experience. It's a set of experiences from social conditioning that breaks or betrays our inherent need for safety, belonging, and dignity. So, safety, belonging, and dignity is kind of what we were just talking about in the slides on dignity, that when trauma enters the field, it sort of betrays this and it breaks it. So what ends up happening is that these experiences have us vying between inherent needs and setting those needs against one another. These traumatic experiences force us into a kind of internal competition between our own needs. And we know that this is in our spaces, this is in our lives. I'm going to quote here Prentice Hemphill, who talks a little bit about this moment that we're in right now, too, which is that there's real danger in this moment. There's mounting political and ecological threats. But our ability to respond is grounded in grounded ways, is warped by our culture's hyperactivity. The constant barrage of news intentionally activates our fear, and the drum of social media sounds a relentless warning, fueled by our most reactive and addictive capacities. We live in a state of outrage that sparks and fades, and our bodies are left defensive and often depleted. So, when we're stressed, when we're overwhelmed, when things are traumatic, we react. And it's because we're thinking, feeling humans, and so are the people that we work with. So now that we've kind of have a sort of awareness and understanding around trauma, we're going to talk about what it means to be trauma responsive in this context. So restorative advocacy invites us to work with care and relational integrity within our complex environments, reminding us to think about the interconnected web that we're a part of and bringing in those restorative justice principles. And trauma responsive advocacy really focuses on the how. How do we do that in our interactions? Central to this is the idea of responsiveness. Responsiveness is our capacity to respond skillfully to others' needs, skillfully to other people, while also simultaneously remaining responsive to our own internal signals and limits. So it is a simultaneous being responsive to others and being responsive to ourselves. This is us, right? So yes, we are with our client, we are with our student, we are with our participant, but we are also with ourselves. Thinking here a lot about presence and attunement. To be responsive is to really have a strong presence, both in ourselves and in how we are showing up in our relationship, and being able to also attune to the people around us and attune to the situations that we're in, and that we're working through with the people that we're talking with. Amanda Blake, another great author, I'm going to show this book as well, Your Body is Your Brain, describes presence as the capacity to have your attention simultaneously on yourself and on another or others. And a deep presence requires feeling all of your own sensations while tuning in to the people around you. And our presence is critical. It's kind of like our spiritual, emotional, relational currency, because it shapes the emotional and relational field and tone of our interactions. So it's about what we exude when we're with other people and what we're able to receive and how we respond to that. And with our presence, we can practice attunement, which is, really the relational practice of presence and co-regulation, kind of like co-responding, kind of connecting at the same time, that can shift an interaction through our ability to be able to be responsive instead of reactive. This requires us to be self-aware. Okay, it requires us to work with what's present for us when we can increase our ability to address what's going on with us and even hold the hard stuff, move with it, process it, interpret things a little bit differently. When we can do that, we can be a little bit more clear and open up space within ourselves to be more direct and authentic with others. Um, we do this by developing an inner flexibility. Okay. This is how we cultivate the capacity to know how to be present and how to ground ourselves, to kind of regulate our own emotions and our physical responses, especially to stress or trauma. And when we do that, we're able to stay in relationship and stay with it and stay present in the midst of stress and conflict. And so it's really about developing that inner flexibility. So what we can notice, what we can digest, what we can integrate as we're experience to transmit a more calm, steady presence to the people around us. And I really like the teachings of Thomas Hubel. He talks about this as resilient presence. Um, and Richard Strozzi, Richard Strozzi Heckler, who's another an amazing somatic teacher, one of the founders of the Strozzi Institute, also teaches that this self-awareness, this kind of resilience, is grounded. When our resilience and our presence is grounded, there's a deeply felt, energetic presence that has the power to bring together that which is fragmented to create balance and clarity from chaos. So we are in the chaos, and if our presence can be the thing in real time that can bring in some clarity, to bring in some balance amid the chaos, that in and of itself is a valuable skill to have. So this way we increase our self-awareness, increase our flexibility, increase our resilience so that we can remove the static, have a clearer signal, and respond as best as we can to the people that we're working with and the environments and circumstances we're in. So just going to take a moment right now to just invite us. This is just a quick, short practice. Demointe, you don't have to come on screen. Is like, let's just take a moment to think about who, if it's you, if it's somebody you know, who is someone in your life or someone who you admire, maybe somebody you know personally, or whose work you've read, or whose work you admire. Who is somebody whose practice and whose presence makes you feel most at ease, makes you feel most grounded, and what are the kind of qualities that they hold, right? So think of someone whose presence puts you at ease, and what are some of the qualities that they have? And let's put a few of those in the chat. What is the qualities of a person who has that kind of strong grounding presence, who can put things at ease, who can make things really clear, who can clear the chaos into some clear signal? Who is that? And what kind of qualities and presence do they bring? And I think for me, when I think about that, I think of like someone who appears and in their presence feels sort of unshakable. Not to say that they don't have their own struggles, but that they're maybe unshakable. Somebody who maybe has the ability to really listen, kind of tuning in to what's happening, hear it, see it, be able to decipher what's happening. Body nerds who know themselves well, centered and grounded, people who are grounded, somebody with humility, yes. Somebody who can listen and to create space, yes. They lean in, they help navigate. They provide insights that are perspective changing. Yes, when there's somebody who could just like shift the perspective and suddenly we're moving in a different direction. They're great listeners. They're extremely curious. They remember everything you tell them. I feel so seen and known when I'm with them. They don't fall into the drama. Yeah, they just kind of like, they know their lane. They keep with it. Yeah. People with good energetic boundaries. They don't try to force solutions and they're unafraid to be silent. So they speak up when they know that there's something to say. Yes. They open space for you and to help you find your own solution. So they really know how to help you feel more empowered and find your own agency. Yeah. So they kind of can support you in that. Mhm. They allow me to simply exist without justification or judgment, and they're grounded and they ask really good questions. Yeah. And people with a clear sense of their ethics, but not a desire to make everyone agree with them. So they can actually hold that complexity, right? They can hold the disagreement. Mhm. So I'm going to just kind of briefly go through because we talked about presence, but we are still talking about what it means to be trauma responsive. And I don't want to be glib here. There's lots and lots of trainings out there. Excuse me. There's lots of trainings out there about, being trauma informed. Many of us probably have sat through a lot of these trainings. Maybe we conduct them ourselves. And what it means to be trauma informed, sort of is the realization and recognition that trauma exists, right? We recognize the prevalence of it. We know that it happens and that we have an obligation then to respond, and respond in very specific ways. And we might do this through our policies, through our interactions, through our practices. And we do this so that we actually resist re-traumatization, so we can create more safe, trustworthy, or supportive environments. So here are some of the principles of being trauma informed: creating safety, creating trust and transparency, being collaborative with some mutuality, some peer support, providing choice and agency, and cultural humility. So again, all of these things, this is how we are trauma informed, but how? How? So trauma responsiveness really enhances trauma-informed practice. I got this slide from the last NACRJ conference in DC by Jamie Harris Rosen and Suk-Kyung Kwan, where they were talking about being trauma responsive in circle keeping. So this really was like an aha. So I really give a lot of credit to their work. And PS, NACRJ conference this summer, there's going to be a lot of discussions too, I saw, on trauma responsiveness and different practices. So sign up. But this approach then to be trauma responsive, to enhance trauma informed practice, is incorporating stress and trauma literacy. So we understand stress and trauma a little bit better, more body-based awareness and practices to support physiological and psychological regulation, overall wellness, and increased capacity for more restorative interventions. Okay, so we are increasing our own capacity to practice being trauma informed. What does it mean to create safety? What does it mean? How do we know what safety feels like? Do we know what safety feels like in our own experience and in our own bodies in order to then be able to create safety for others? Do we know what that is? So really we think about what are the capacities and the ways that we need to have our own skills and sense of how we show up in our work and what we do in order to create more trauma informed. Is safety real? Great question. Somebody just asked in the chat. I feel like there can be a whole webinar on that. So back to the framework, right? Because there's a lot of different elements to it. And I'm also keeping an eye on time. This framework has 4 distinct pillars for how we become trauma responsive and restorative in our advocacy. And like I said, there is a lot in the article, so I'm going to just kind of tease out a few key areas here, and we're going to talk about kind of a few things to highlight here. So trauma responsive restorative advocacy is really about experiential education and practice. And when we practice, what that means, okay? So experiential education is one thing to learn about something. We can get the information, we can have the trainings, but also how do we then practice? And as we're learning, can we be active in the ways that we're learning as well? And can we be learning not just through a slide deck, can we be learning through practice as well? So another concept coming through, okay? Before we move into all the pillars, this is a concept I wanna share and for us to explore together a bit, which is integral to the framework and what we're talking about here. And maybe some of you know this term, so we're gonna talk briefly about it. Interoception, we're gonna talk about it and do a short practice to experiment with it, and we'll take a breather from the slides for a moment. So interoception is our interoceptive awareness, which is quite literally the ability to sense and interpret our internal body cues, like our heart rate, our muscle tension, breath, other sort of visceral physical sensation. And Dr. Ray Johnson describes it as the sensory information arising from within the body. So our culture is really hyperfixated to keeping us quiet in our heads. We are looking at things, we live through our eyeballs, we live in our minds, we're all on our screens. Like it's like everything is up here, we're like constantly here. But it's like we forget that we actually have a full body that we're connecting to. So we often don't notice, we ignore, we override our body's signals because our modern culture has us just living in a very cognitive behavioral paradigm. It's kind of rooted in Western philosophy that really privileges being rational and cognitive, the sort of I think, therefore I am, Descartes had said. Just it's really prioritizing our intellect over our full body experience. And it kind of relies on this linear cause and effect thinking, like we're if I just think it through, then it can become reality. But Dr. Ray Johnson describes that the actual complexities of human experience is the dynamic tensions, complex undercurrents, and tangled contradictions that emerge when interpersonal and embodied dimensions are factored into the mix. So it's really kind of like a prerequisite to be able to self regulate, because when something is happening, when we're in a conversation and something might land the wrong way for us, are we able to notice our heart rate increase in real time? Are we able to notice the sort of tingling in our jaw? Or does that tingling in our jaw then just get us to say the thing that we then regret later saying? So it's really about the noticing. Can we notice? And our culture really has kind of a poverty of language in describing what we feel, what we notice in our bodies. Like we generally ask each other, like, how you doing? How you feeling? And you're like, good. I'm like, okay, good. Yeah, me too. So we're going to do a quick exercise. And again, this practice is completely optional. Des Moines, I'll invite you to come back on our screen. And we're going to play around with interoception just for a couple moments and see what we might notice in ourselves. Now, I do want to acknowledge that for some people, it's like going to be very simple and easy and natural to do this. And for some people, it's not. And for some people too, kind of focusing inward on the body might not actually feel safe, might not feel good, especially if we're feeling a lot of chronic pain or the body has not historically been a really safe place for us to go. So truly choose what is most comfortable for yourself. So we're going to the invitation here, if you are feeling ready to experiment with interoception, is just to notice what's happening within. We're going to notice our internal landscape. Okay, there's no right way to explore, just an invitation to get curious. So you're in your comfortable position and you've been seated for a while. So maybe stand up or find something in a way that you can feel the support underneath you, whether it's the chair or the ground. You can keep your eyes open or closed, or maybe a soft gaze. And now see what you might notice about the temperature of the air right now. What does your skin feel like? Right? Are you noticing that it's a little cool, or maybe you're a little bit warm? See what you're noticing right now about the textures you're feeling on your body, your fabrics. Are you feeling softness? Maybe you might notice some weight or some tightness, like a waistband or the top of the socks. See if you can notice, nothing to fix, nothing to change, just kind of notice those sensations. See if you notice what points of your body are making contact with clothing or furniture or objects, maybe an animal friend. And just notice what that contact feels like. Is there firmness? Is there softness? Does it feel supportive or constricting? Do you want more contact, less? Now slowly turn your attention inward and start to notice your breath. Just observing it, not changing it in any way. But what are you noticing? Is it shallow? Is it full? Is it fast? Is it slow? Where do you feel it? Is it in your nose, your chest? Where's your breath? And now see if you can sense your heartbeat. Maybe you might notice it in your chest. Maybe you're noticing it in your throat. There's no rules here, so if you want, you can maybe feel for it. Can you notice your heartbeat? Have you noticed your heartbeat today? And just notice. Just say hello. And just close this practice with a quick scan too, just from your head to your shoulders, to your chest, to your gut, to your pelvis, your thighs, your knees, and your feet. See what might come up. What might you notice? How do you feel? So instead of maybe saying, I feel anxious, maybe you're feeling tight, constricted, buzzing, loose, warm, peaceful, fluttery, hard, expansive, collapsed. So what kind of words come up? So I invite us back together. If you feel like sharing in the chat, always an invitation for that. And I will say for myself, as I was doing that practice, I actually was feeling like my heartbeat was really beating. So I feel like I'm like on, I'm watching the clock. I know that there's more to say. So I could feel my heartbeat. And now I feel that it has slowed down a bit. Demointe, what did you notice if you feel like sharing?
Yeah. I noticed, like, especially like doing the scan, almost the sensation of static. It was kind of difficult to get through, like to notice something other than just a sort of vague feeling. But then I like breathed like a bit more deeply and was able to see through the static a little bit more and get a real sense of just like the small things that I was noticing.
Static is always there too, right? Like that's such good noticing too. Hmm. It's part of it. There's a question in the chat. We'll try to do some Q&A at the end. But I'll see if there's anybody else that feels like sharing what they noticed. Otherwise, I'm going to move on because I do want to make sure we get through these things. Comment in the chat about feeling weighty and sinking into my seat. Beautiful. So feeling some of that weight. See, feeling our weight, right? We're not flying. Okay. So we'll move on. We'll bring the slides on back. So interoception. We'll now talk a bit about these pillars. All right. So the first pillar here, thank you for another comment in the chat, noticing tightness in my back and shoulders. Good noticing, right? Just noticing where our bodies are at right now. So one of the first pillars here is stress and trauma education. Now, this is massive. This is a massive area, and we're not going to go into all of it. That in its own is its own webinar, it's its own lecture. So I'm going to just kind of give these brush strokes here about how the field of trauma has really expanded. And when we're talking about trauma now, we're no longer just talking about ACEs and amygdalas. There's a lot more attention around the body, around cultural, around generational, and all of the other systemic aspects of trauma. So when we're talking about trauma education and we're doing this kind of trauma education in our academic institutions or our workplace environments, what are we focusing on? And could we be a little bit more expansive in our trauma education? Because the field has expanded and continues to. And also, it's not, a lot of these concepts aren't new. There's been ways of understanding trauma for generations and generations. So can we be thinking about how we educate and talk about trauma in these like trauma-informed education spaces that we have? And many of us are working in environments too, where we're experiencing sort of systemic and moral injury when it comes to trauma. So how do we have the conversations around that as well? There's a lot of research around the neuroscience of stress and trauma, which lives along a continuum. There's a lot around our sort of personal ecologies and how stress works in our bodies. And this is all super important for at least understanding, like, why do we feel the way that we feel? All of this is theory, but it helps us to understand and maybe recognize in ourselves the ways that we feel. So I'm going to breeze through one area. I'm going to do a double click right now because this is getting a lot of play in our culture. A lot of people are talking about nervous systems this day. So I just want to highlight briefly one area in trauma education that's relevant for the framework. It's not the all-encompassing, it's not the only one, but it's one that I just want to highlight today. So as we just did the interoceptive exercise and we're thinking about being more attuned to our body, talk about the polyvagal theory, which is by a researcher, Stephen Porges, kind of introduced in the 90s, that really it has kind of expanded our thinking of how our autonomic nervous system, how our nervous system works in the body. And there's a lot of conversations about nervous systems this day, so I think it's just kind of nice for us to like do a quick view. Like if our nervous system is through our entire body and we're seeing all of the different areas that it touches, like it's no wonder that our body sends us signals and information. Teresa Gabriel describes this nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, as the neural architecture of the mind-body connection, and it controls the deepest, most powerful levels that govern our moment-to-moment experience of well-being. So this is our heartbeat. This is our breathing. This is like the tingling that we might be feeling in the different parts of our bodies. And we've had, I'm sure in all different education, there's been conversations around fight, freeze, And now a lot of people talk about appease as well. So I'm just putting those resources in the chat that, these kind of tendencies, the fight or flight mode that we're in is not just like fight and I'm now in an argument. Fight actually might include something like racing thoughts all the time, emotionally, like just really, really thinking things that are really, really dire, being unable to stop working, just like this constant, like needing to be in motion, unable to turn it all off, this hypervigilance and this fear. So when we're in this mode, in a fight mode, for example, or flight mode, how do we notice? How do we know that we're there? Right? Can we check in with ourselves and be like, oh, I'm there. I'm there right now. Sometimes it's called for. These are all our kind of natural responses. There's not necessarily that it's good or bad, but we can get stuck in these modes. Sometimes the circumstances call for it, right? When things actually are urgent, we do need to be responsive, like we need to be reacting. But sometimes we just get stuck in these modes and we can get stuck in them for hours, for days, for years. Okay, so it's really about kind of being more aware of when we are in certain states. Are we in a fight flight state? Are we in a freeze state where we're just like, we're just like, we're offline, right? We can't handle, we're not here anymore. We kind of turn off. And that might just be something that's in your conditioning and the impulsive way that your body works. So we have an understanding around this in order to then work with it. Okay, the reason we talk about this is so that we can work with it. Neuroception is another concept. I'm going to bring this through. So the ways in which our bodies do react in the fight or flight or in the freeze or in appease is that we're actually kind of reacting to our environments and the people that we encounter. Our bodies are always scanning for cues of safety or threat. And this is something that's introduced through Stephen Porges, through the polyvagal theory, which is why I highlight that theory. So it's the way that our nervous systems continually scan. We're kind of scanning our environment, and we do this unconsciously. It's both kind of hardwired and it also adjusts based on our previous experience and conditioning. So neuroception, this can feel really different with different people. People who've experienced a lot of stress and trauma in their lives may be having more hyper vigilance. And there's also even the concept of like faulty neuroception. But so we're like scanning, we're scanning other people. Our bodies are transmitting and communicating with each other. And this isn't like our nervous systems are whispering to one another. It's that it's through several mechanisms. Mirror neurons are firing, emotional contagion. What are we actually sensing? What might we be noticing that we're sensing in our bodies and not noticing that we're sensing in our bodies that sends us signals? Now, my colleague and collaborator, friend and collaborator, Zaida Diatta, talks about how if we know about neuroception, it's sort of at the core of direct service, right? Like if we understand that our bodies encounter other bodies and that we react to one another, then we as the practitioners or we as the attorney, that we actually have a responsibility to be aware of this in ourselves. I'm going to quote here Resmaa Menakem, who says that when one settled body encounters another, this can create deeper settling of both bodies. But when one unsettled body encounters another, the unsettledness tends to compound in both bodies. So here's you're scanning. Here's your client, your student, your participant, and they're also scanning. Okay, so in this real time, like we are also subliminally, subconsciously communicating with one another beyond just the words that we're saying. But it's not just us, right? It's everybody. So here we are. We're all like pinging and kind of scanning. Do we feel safe? Do we feel calm here? Do we feel safe here? Or do we need to be on high alert? And so it's also at the heart of co-regulation. It's at the heart of creating the environment in our interactions. It's sort of like an emotional relational force field. Okay, so this is us. And again, when one settled body encounters another, this can create deeper settling in both bodies. So what this means for us, though, as practitioners, it's not like, oh, we're aspiring to always be the Zen, grounded, calm space. But if we have an awareness of where we are, how we are, then we can be more choiceful about how we are engaging. And if our priority is to uphold dignity, to act into our restorative values, then that internal assessment and awareness is very, very helpful. So how do we get there? Okay, how do we get there? So this is where we're going to talk about some of these practices. And again, I'm mindful of time, so we're going to move through the pillars of practice. And I'm going to start here with why these practices are beneficial. So these actually, there's a lot of science, a lot of research around this, that each one of these pillars of practices actually help us have those qualities and characteristics that help us be more trauma informed, allow us to act restoratively, to be more relational, right? By providing opportunities to engage and practice with things like self-awareness, things like deep listening. And when we're practicing, we're always practicing something. So I just want to kind of name that too. Like we are always practicing something. Maybe we're practicing shortening our attention span by like scrolling and kind of seeing headline after headline. Maybe we're practicing, as I have been, going to bed too late each night. Maybe we're practicing urgency. Maybe we're practicing being distracted. So we're always actually practicing something. So these are specific practice areas in order to be practicing these other kind of ways of engaging, right? Deep listening, patience, practicing compassion, cultivating the capacity for empathy and observation, and these kind of characteristics that we aspire towards. And we do this, I'm going to just brief over this, neuroplasticity. We as adults even have the capability of kind of rewiring how we operate. This is research and science around this too, that through habits, through repetition, we can repattern. We can actually repattern until it becomes automatic for us, and then we find that we have changed responses. I mean, anybody who's ever like, I'm going to go start running and then runs a half marathon, those repetitive practices do help us become kind of what the changed behavior that we aspire towards is, how we get there. And I'm just going to cite, James Clear, Atomic Habits is a nice book, and there's a lot of other research around it. Check the footnotes. Okay. So restorative practice is one of these practice areas. I'm going to brief over this as well, because I know a lot of people here understand what this is, but by design, this is a practice of repetition. There's discipline in the talking piece. It works on us without us really knowing. And so there's in habit formation happening here, helps us cultivate those skills. And it really requires us to be patient and deep listening. And I'm going to quote De Mointe, who I quoted also in the article, which is that in Encircle, we also are just encouraged to sink into our bodies and just be with the body in the ways that it is. So having this kind of practice space where we can connect with other practitioners or be together in restorative practice helps us cultivate these skills. I'm going to put in the chat here an article by Natalie Netzel, who writes about moral injury for those working specifically in the legal system, but in these hard systems, about the need to build communities of moral reflection, places where we can speak honestly about ethical tensions, share our experiences without fear or judgment, and support one another in the work of aligning our actions with our values. And of course, I'm going to tie in the science here. We just talked about interoception, neuroception. Lauren Abramson does great work talking about what is happening scientifically here in the neuroscience way of us picking up on the cues of others, mirror neurons firing, social emotional contagion. So there's a lot happening in the circle space that is almost like our gym, where we can practice the reps to have some of those capacities increase and have that repetition. Contemplative practice. I'm going to breeze through this one because I do want to get to our last practice. Lots about mindfulness practices. So we're talking about meditation. We're talking about art making, journaling, yoga, group practice. How better to know that oneself, but through engaging in these contemplative practices. We increase our meta awareness, where we can observe ourselves and observe our own consciousness. So I'm going to just pass through on contemplative practice, not because it's not important, but there is a lot out there on mindfulness. Luckily, it's been really increasing in popularity. So it is something that I'm sure if you want to engage with, you can easily find. And there's some science around that too, but we'll skip through into somatic practice. Now, somatic practice too is really at the heart of the framework, because as I said, so many of us are conditioned in our heads. It really takes some intention to get into our bodies. We learn to ignore our bodies, but our bodies are actually our instruments. And so we engage in somatic practice, or I describe it as body-based practices, in order to be more embodied as we're working with people, and more embodied in actually living into and practicing the values that we want. Because we're not just our emails, our eyeballs, our voices, we are our full bodies. I'm going to quote Prentice Hemphill about what it means to be embodied. The definition of embodiment is a growing awareness of bodily sensations, patterns, habits, beliefs, and the context through which the body learns and experiences the felt sense of these expressions and being in the world. And again, to quote Richard Strozzi Heckler, that when we are embodied, we become learners. We can learn from situations. We can learn from our experience and from life. If we don't live in our body, which is the seat of our experience, we're only capable of rote learning and reacting in mechanical ways. And we know we get into these mechanical reactive ways, especially in the context of our work environments and the context of our world right now. We can just stay in these reactions. So the field of somatics, and I did some thinking around like, how do we describe somatics? Because it's so broad, and I know that we're nearing the end here. So these are the last few slides. Somatics is a field of movement studies and body work. It foregrounds our internal physical sensations, perceptions, and experiences of the body. And Stacey Haynes really nails it by saying somatics holds that the body is inseparable from the self and how we live, act, and relate. And the field of somatic practices is quite broad. I tried to distill the different areas of somatic practice. Some of you may be hearing this word for the first time. Some of you have been hearing it kind of also kind of popping up a little bit more in mainstream culture. But somatic practices has a huge range. So some of the practices really are about stabilization, kind of creating safety in the body, downshifting from stress, recognizing where we are with our fight or flight tendencies, or where we might be feeling a little bit more activated in our nervous system, and finding ways to bring ourselves to safety. All the way, and I guess there's not really like a hierarchy, but all the way to somatic practice being used in trauma healing context. It's being used a lot more in therapeutic context. It's being used a lot more in like clinical therapy spaces. And all of this practices in between, these different kind of modalities where there's coordination and body awareness to kind of self-organize, connect the mind-body connection, and also connect with our presence and purpose. And then this is the last slide, and there's a lot here, so I'm not really going into it, but I kind of compiled, and this is not exhaustive, but the different modalities that exist when we're talking about somatic practice. So just to kind of give you a sense that it's not just one kind of practice. Now, for example, my friend and collaborator, Lindsay Frischer, teaches in the Strozzi lineage and the generative somatics, politicized somatics lane. And I have certification in the resilience toolkit methodology, which really focuses on like the sort of more stabilization micro practices. And when we've done work together, our kind of modalities really blend. So there's different ways that these practices and these type of modalities can work together. And that's like good ways to engage with restorative practice, depending on the practitioner, depending on the context. So we're going to close. I see we're getting closer to time. So we're going to close with just a few micro practices to end with. See if we have like a few minutes for Q&A before we close. Just kind of a quick last slide, and I'll come off screen, off slides. I love talking about all this. So anytime that you'd want to connect, I'd be more than happy to connect with you all. My email, and we'll put a link in the chat for a way for us to stay connected. So let's do like in the last few minutes, just a few settling practices, okay? And just see where we are. Now, as we talked about earlier, the fight or flight, where we might notice we're like in a sort of hyper response, or we're noticing our signs of being in high activation, or we're feeling the stress in our bodies or noticing these sensations in our bodies. How do we also notice when we're actually settling? So I'm going to just name a few signs of settling that you might notice as you engage in a practice. Some signs of settling might be deeper breath, right? It might be sighing. It might be yawning, might be some watery eyes or saliva in the mouth. You might feel your shoulders drop, maybe some more warmth. You might feel your thoughts clearing. So as we do next exercise, just see what you notice. And there's nothing to try to do too hard, nothing to change, just noticing. And again, always optional. If there's any discomfort or it's not working for you, just stop. But I'm going to invite you now, since we've been looking at the screen for a long time, going through slides, to engage in a practice right now that helps us orient to our environments. So I'm going to invite you now to just move your eyes away from the screen, and I will do the same. And start to turn your head and notice your space. See what colors might be coming to you. See what shapes. What kind of patterns, what kind of textures might you notice? Feel free to turn your head left and right. What are you noticing about the light or the shadows? What are you seeing in the corners or on the floor? Are there firm surfaces, soft surfaces? Just notice. Notice what's coming to you. And as you're noticing your environment, see what you might also notice you're hearing. Maybe you're noticing hearing the sound of my voice, but maybe you're also noticing other sounds in your space. And are they close? Or are they far? Are they pleasant? Kind of annoying? What sounds might you be noticing? Nothing to do to change, just notice. And as you're taking that in, the invitation is to also notice what you might be feeling, as we did before, right? What might you be feeling on your skin right now, in the fabrics and the textures surrounding you? So anything that you feel like needed an adjustment? What might you notice on the weight? What's underneath you? What's next to you? And just take another moment to notice, and we can come back together. Just final kind of noticing here. Demointe, what did you notice?
I was really focused on what I was seeing. I noticed like a reflective piece on, I can see my running shoes in the distance. And so I like keyed in on like the reflective piece on my shoes. Yeah, I was noticing different like paint patterns on my walls. Yeah, just small
Beautiful.
things.
Beautiful. And if anybody feels like sharing in the chat what they noticed as well, for me, I definitely noticed it slowed down my thoughts. And so that was very helpful as we're closing things out. I am mindful, there's a couple more exercises we can try, but I am mindful of time. So Demointe, I'm happy to turn it over. If you're interested in doing more practices, let's connect, right? I'd love to hold spaces where we can practice together. I do a bi-monthly or monthly-ish space. I'm calling it a stabilizing space where we can all practice together. And there's a lot, oh, beautiful, another reflection coming in, looking outside and breathing slowed down. Excellent. Yeah, and there's a lot of different types of practices. Those were some observation practices, but there's also movement and breathing and other kind of tactile, self-tactile practices. So thanks so much for the invitation today to share a bit of this work with y'all. And I hope to hear from y'all soon. Really great to be with you all. Thank you, Demointe.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we have about 3 minutes left and I have some announcements, but if there are one or two questions that maybe we have time for maybe one question. But if not, we can also just share our gratitude for Amy for sharing this space. This video will be automatically recorded, and so it will be in our on our Zare Institute YouTube under the live section. Hillary, I see your question. That might be a longer question, so I might have you connect with Amy, if that's okay with you, Amy.
Yes,
I'll copy down
great.
that question and I'll send it
Thank
to
you.
you. Yeah, of course. Okay, Amy, thank you again so much. For everyone else, I have a couple of quick announcements. We have 2 more webinars coming up in April. I'm unofficially calling it Restorative Reads Week. We have 2 great books and the authors of those books, Restorative Justice Up Close with Sally Wolf and Dr. Sandra Pavelka and Dawn Carney, and then Restorative Justice and Community, the little book of Restorative Justice and Community with Caitlin Morneau and Cheryl Wilson. And so I'm going to drop the links to register for those if you have not yet. We would love to see you. Grab the books. You have plenty of time to grab the books and peruse them, read them, and come with really good questions for the authors and editors. Yeah, thank you for that. And if you have not already, please connect with us via our website. Feel free to donate and get connected to our work there. And as always, as I mentioned, our live webinars are automatically uploaded to our YouTube under the live section. So feel free to go back through the archives and see all of the great work that we have already shared there. Thank you all so much. Again, I'm going to put Amy's slide up one more time just so you can get connected, reach out, get connected to the work that she is doing to spread the word around trauma responsive restorative advocacy. Thank you all so much for being here. Wishing you wellness. Nourish yourselves, and if you have the opportunity to nourish someone else, take great care. Bye-bye.